Blacks are the light that expose hidden biases. This video breaks down how some aspects of racism and racial bias from white people against black people often goes hidden amongst peers in the white community when they interact with each other from an intergroup psychological perspective. You don't really see the biased, racist nature of a lot of white folks, Asian folks, Hispanics, different non black groups, a lot of times until an African American is sort of introduced to the system. When non black groups are interacting with each other, and for example, there's no African American, black sort of people on the scene, and they're just sort of interacting with each other amongst the group. You may have occasions where, through sarcasm and through humor, they may make jokes about black people from news stories, or if they're talking about a work colleague, or maybe someone they know is dating a black person, they might make certain jokes in humor, where humor is, in a way, a very manipulative, it can be a very manipulative sort of medium where racists tend to camouflage their hatred or bias towards certain groups. And generally, white people who may have black friends, they may not have an awareness or a full blown understanding or knowledge of the degree and extent of the racism that's occurring in their groups when the group is essentially dominated by people who look like them. An all white group, unless, like I said, there's some sort of story or incident, they don't really have a cause to expose their racism. So, black people, in a lot of ways, when they come on the scene, they tend to be like these activators or exposures of, they expose the racism in a lot of groups that a lot of white people didn't even know about. And this is speaking from personal experience, where a lot of times when white people are only interacting with other white people, they may assume that, oh, my friends are culturally competent. This person is a social studies teacher, or this one is a therapist, this one's a lawyer, this one is a doctor, right? They hold these prestigious roles. So it can communicate to a lot of the in group, like, hey, you guys are pretty much diverse, competent. But you notice when a black person, that only black person that they might know, gets invited to a cookout or gets invited to the party, then all of a sudden things get weird, right? You ever notice that? This might be something only black people can relate to, where, and the only reason I say this, not to be narcissist about it, is just because when the world is dominated by people who look like you, if you can go places and there's a ton of Mexicans, or there's a ton of Asians, or a ton of white people, it's not really an issue when you're the most represented group in terms of being insulated or alienated, because for the most part, most people look like you. So these experiences that black people a lot of times are so unique in that they're very much a product of being the minority. And some white folks might only understand when they're in the situation where they are the minority. But even then, it's not so much the behavior, it's the intention behind the behavior. So it may look the same on the surface, but the function is different. So you can't, kind of equivalate it. But you'll notice as a black person where it seems like before you come on the scene, there's this sense amongst the in group or intergroup of like normalcy, right? They sort of have their way of communicating, they have their comfortability. Everything seems like it's just flowing along. And as soon as you come into that group, it just seems like something changes when a black person is introduced to a group that does not necessarily reflect or represent their culture or ethnicity. And it's like almost like black people acts as like an exposure in a way. So if you really want to expose the nature or the racial bias of a white person, and I feel like I have to talk about these things because you don't have as educated and as sophisticated or as these institutional academic scholarly programs are in America, they're not really teaching our youth and the American public on how to address and navigate a system of, and it's beyond racism. It's a sophisticated, evolved hatred and envy that it's hard to navigate. Hate is not an easy thing. Some people just kind of make it seem like, well, if people don't like you, you just avoid. You can't avoid hatred. If majority of the American population in public represent groups that, not all of them, but a vast majority of them don't like you, that's not easy, because you got to go to work, you got to deal with some of these people. You go to the hospital, you got to deal with these people. If you need to call the police, you got to deal with these. So it's not an easy thing in America navigating hate, and it even creates a sense of paranoia because you don't know who is who. Okay, so these conversations need to be discussed. Do I like talking about race and racism every fucking day? Do I like living in this reality where I got to constantly second guess and question who can be trusted, who can't? Where am I feel? Where am I safe? Where are my children safe? Where they're not? Fuck no. If I can wake up in a world where I can just live my damn life and think about prospering, think about networking and building business and building infrastructure, that's what I would focus on. But you have to take these things in consideration, because all business ain't good business. You might fuck around and try to network with people who hate niggas and who hate black people, and it might cost you your fucking business. You don't know what these people can do behind the scenes, especially with this sort of litigious state that we live in. You gotta have an awareness of what the fuck racism and the consequences can cost you. It can cost you your fucking life. So no, I don't love talking about this shit, but we have to. If you got to meet reality where reality is in order to be skillful. This idea of you got to be ignorant to shit to be, advanced and skillful is bullshit. That's not how life works. If you don't know shit about women, you never had a woman in your life, you never even tried, and you just went off of what you heard your boy say and what you saw on TV, that doesn't make you fucking skillful with women. At some point, you got to go out there. You got to take risks. You might get your fucking heart broke. You might get rejected. But all of those rejections are lessons. So there comes a degree of exposure to be skillful. And it's the same thing with fucking racism. You guys kill me in America where you just feel like being ignorant to shit is equals skill. Well, if we don't talk about it and we stop talking about race, then you guys just figure that shit out. That's not how the fuck life works, man. That's why I'm not interested in being famous, because the human community now is so fucking insulated from each other. It's just you having to go. It's like each person represents a different classroom, and you get tired of going from class to class to fucking class, having to re-educate people, test to see whether people's knowledge is aligned with what you know and your experiences. And that shit is a lot of fucking work, you know. So sometimes also it's like sometimes I battle myself. I'm like, damn, Randy, you could really take this shit to the next level. But it's like sometimes you would rather not get too much attention and too much notoriety, because it's a lot of fucking work, because everybody thinks so differently. All right. So this shit needs to be talked about. Black people are like the light. What does light do? It exposes. So sometimes black folks might feel like, damn, it seemed like these motherfuckers was getting along all right. As soon as I come on the scene, why are people acting so different? Why are motherfuckers acting so funny? Why does it seem like I'm attracting all this negative energy? It ain't always a law of attraction. A lot of times it's a law of exposure. It's a law of exposure. Many fucking humans, it's not uncommon, insulate themselves from realities they don't feel like they're skillful in. I don't know how to deal with black people. I don't know how to talk to them. I don't know how to interact with them because my damn grandpa and grandma didn't like niggas, so we ain't had no black friends. We didn't go to any black schools. They told me black was bad, so I would just rather avoid them because that's just the luxury of my life has given me. So they avoid these different communities and these different groups, and black people can't avoid fucking white people. You can't. You can't. Even if you move to an all black neighborhood, more than likely, if you call the fucking police, more than likely, if you work at a damn company, at somewhere in that chain of command, you got to deal with a fucking white person. All right. So we don't have that luxury of just insulating ourselves from white people and staying in this ignorance where we just create these pseudo realities where we don't got to deal with shit we don't feel comfortable with. We don't have that fucking luxury. White people, they can go 80, 100 fucking years not seeing one nigga. And even the niggas that they see, they don't got to really worry about them because they go back home. They go to these different communities and environments that have been created systemically to insulate a lot of these folks from niggas, especially when you're talking about classism. All right. So that's why I talk about this. But black people are like the light. You white people out there that's listening, because I know you're out there. If you really want to see the nature and the mindset, if you ever doubted whether your family was diverse, competent, and had any racial bias against black people, go out there and get some damn black friends. All right. You don't even need black friends, just one black person. Invite them to the cookout, where usually every year it's all your family, all your friends, and they all look like you. Bring one black person one year, and you're going to see the activation depending on the person. Some people, it's seamless for them. They may not even flinch. Like, hey, if anything, they might be welcoming. So I'm not saying like all white people are going to be, disrespectful or insulting, but a lot of times the true nature and degree of racial bias and hatred in white people isn't activated until a damn black person is on the scene. All right. That's just what it is. So we act as a symbolic light in this world. Okay. So let me break this down for you guys because you don't hear me. Latent racial bias and prejudice often remains dormant under a veneer of politeness, social norms, or passive egalitarianism. Egalitarianism, when individuals operate within racially homogenous environments, right? Everything is okay. Everything is smooth. There's law and order. Nobody's uncomfortable. There's no discomfort. We're all having a good, joyful little time amongst our in group, amongst people who look like me. Okay. So it just gives this sort of communication of, everything is natural and smooth, right? When you're in an environment that's homogenous of people who only look like you, all right? Especially in the white community. For many African Americans, the sudden shift in how white acquaintances behave or how white peers within a shared social circle react when a black person enters the space can be striking. An environment that previously felt neutral or friendly can instantly shift, exposing microaggressions, hypervigilance, cold detachment, or overt hostility. I remember when I was in San Diego and Mira Mesa at Miramar College, and the semester just fucking started. First day of class, majority of these schools, back then when I was coming out the military were predominantly white and Asian. Mira Mesa is a dominant Asian and white community. So when you're going on the campus, you're not going to see a lot of folks that look like you back then. You see a couple, but not as much. And then this history class I was taking was just dominated by non-black people, which I'm cool with. I'm coming from the military. So for me, you had no choice but to interact with different racial groups and different ethnicities. So it's not like, I'm getting knocked upside the head. It's like, this is what I do. But when you're dealing with civilians, you guys are a little bit spoiled and sheltered because the military kind of forces you in situations where you have to grow, you have to mature. Even if you don't like a motherfucker, guess what? They're on your team, they're in your squad. You got to accomplish missions. So I feel like sometimes the military are a little bit more resilient and robust when it comes to dealing with like diversity, competence. Civilians, you guys can kind of insulate yourself. You can shield yourself from a lot of things based off of your comfortability and just your own free will. So I feel like you guys tend to be a little bit more sensitive to things that a lot of veterans are kind of like, dude, big fucking deal. So first day of class starts, everybody's getting situated, a lot of people people who know each other. Everybody for the most part who don't know each other just kind of looking at each other crazy as hell. And you should have seen how this history teacher, this white old lady, and I really love history, so I really wanted to take this class. Soon as I walked in the fucking room, it was like this woman was looking like, oh my God, there's a black person. It was almost like she was intimidated because in her mind, she's so used to having non-black people in her classroom. With white folks and non-black folks, depending on their pedigree, they prefer usually to have environments where they don't got to deal with black people, especially if they come from a lifestyle or upbringing where their family never had to really deal with, exposure to black people. So they kind of avoided them. So when they do have to deal with them, even if it's just one, they get really uncomfortable because a lot of white folks know they're biased. They know they're biased. They know their beliefs. They know their prejudiced views of African Americans, and they don't want to be exposed. They don't. So that's why they prefer to be in a lot of times these insulated environments where it's just homogenous or people who look like them and who think like them because they don't, a lot of times they want to hide these biases in these professional settings. Man, that white woman saw me. And mind you, the first day, some people are going to come in late. You're lost. You don't know where the fuck you're going. It's a new semester. So it's not like unless you've mastered the fucking campus and you know where every classroom is, you might be late to a class. So I think I was like a few minutes late, and she was so angry. Like, and the class had just started. Oh, I don't want you in this class. You got to leave. Um, what was her excuse? It was some kind of BS excuse, like, um, you're not on time, And she had started talking a little bit about the chorus. And then as soon as she saw me come in, because I heard a little bit of the introduction, because I remember, because that's where I got this little phrase, like the arrogance of the present mind. I remember she was talking about that. And I was like, damn, in my mind, I'm like, damn, this is going to be a good class. And Black folks can kind of read the body language of white folks, where you could tell when they're really uncomfortable and they're not really excited about you being there. It's like we have to be attuned to this body language for our fucking life, right? For our safety. And not even a couple minutes of me sitting in the classroom, she's like, oh, you have to leave, you know. And people were just looking at me. I felt like they were kind of like looking for me to flip out or something. But I'm just like, fuck it. It's the first day of class. I'm not tripping. But yeah, it a lot of times that hatred and that racism in a lot of these older white folks especially gets dormant when they're in these homogenous environments and there's not really any exposure to a Black person. So Black people can kind of be like the light, where a lot of this shit just kind of activates when you come on the scene. So Black folks, when you're coming on the scene or you're coming into environments that's dominated by people that don't look like you, don't be surprised when you come in, people are kind of looking like, what the fuck? There's a Black person in the room. Oh my God, what are we going to do? That's you being the light in this world. So I'm going to say this again: for many African Americans, the sudden shift in how white acquaintances behave or how white peers within a shared circle react when a Black person enters the space can be striking. An environment that previously felt neutral or friendly can instantly shift, exposing microaggressions, hypervigilance, cold detachment, or overt hostility that was entirely invisible until an African American was physically present. In this way, the physical presence of a Black person functions metaphorically as a light that illuminates hidden social dynamics. It shifts a situation from abstract ideals to lived reality, forcing dormant biases, unspoken racial anxieties, and performative acceptance out of the shadows. Until the light shines on the room, both white friends and African Americans may operate under the illusion of seamless racial harmony, unaware of the deep seated prejudices that surface only when real world cross racial interaction demands genuine engagement. What are the reasons behind this phenomenon? Right? Activation of out group threat response. Implicit bias often stays dormant until an actual out-group stimulus is present. Social psychology demonstrates that for individuals with underlying prejudice, the physical presence of an out-group member activates neural threat detection pathways, such as amygdala activity, instantly triggering instinctual defense mechanisms, heightened stress, or defensive hostility. Intergroup anxiety and cognitive overload. Individuals with unaddressed racial biases frequently experience high levels of intergroup anxiety, a fear of saying the wrong thing, losing control, or being perceived negatively. This psychological stress strains cognitive bandwidth, causing their natural demeanor to break down into awkwardness, rigid posture, microexpressions of discomfort, or abrupt behavioral shifts. In group normative pressure and peer conformity. Solitary interactions allow individuals to act on personal rapport, but group settings trigger a desire for in-group acceptance. A white person who behaves warmly toward a Black acquaintance in private may alter their behavior in front of other white peers to protect their social status, signaling solidarity with the group's dominant norms or latent biases. Disruption of the racial comfort zone. Predominantly white environments often operate on unstated shared cultural defaults where individuals feel psychologically comfortable. The arrival of an African American disrupts this unspoken homogeneity, homogeneity, forcing individuals out of their automatic processing mode and into a self-conscious state that exposes underlying friction and unease. This is why a lot of times Black Americans avoid predominantly white spaces, because they know this in their spirit that just their presence alone triggers so much for, like, white people are very sensitive people, very sensitive. I don't think enough is studied on this. Their sensitivity to outgroup identities are persons who are not by default aligned with their communities. You see this with a lot of white men. They get very frustrated or aggressive or, biased when they see white women with Black men. You see this when, if there's a position in a sort of like a ladder of, performance at work, where one person wants to get promoted, maybe it's a Black versus a white person. You see a lot of envy in positions of leadership or authority that Black people might get that the white person didn't get. They're very sensitive to Black presence. I even notice this when I go to the gym. The gym is predominantly white, like no Black people at all in this gym out here in Mission Viejo. And even when I'm working out, like, white guys, they get so uncomfortable and irritated and annoyed just by me being in the gym. And you can tell because they're like slamming the weights. You're working out and you know how you have the mirror, they'll go stand right in front of you in the mirror. They do like real subtle shit to kind of like trigger, because for white men, they want you to get out of character as a Black person when they dominate the environment. They want to see, you know, are you going to behave in a way that confirms their stereotypes? Don't be the Black person that does the right thing. Maybe, you're not the typical stereotypical Black person. And a lot of times these are the ones that you find in a lot of these dominant sort of like blue collar social groups, or like the Black people who are like above sort of like a lot of the stereotypes. And a lot of times not all of them think they're necessarily better than Black people, but in their mind, I'm not the gangbanger, I don't listen to rap music, they kind of, have these sort of personality quirks that white people tend to resonate with because that's their world, right? And sometimes, they'll try to put you in situations or trigger you to see if, okay, look at John. He's so this new Black guy, he's so cool and he wants to be a part of our group. But I bet you, if we trigger him or we say something to him or do something wrong with him, and they'll do is they'll use a lot of racial humor. I noticed that with white dudes, even in the military, like you'll notice white guys will say a lot of racist jokes about Black people. And what they're looking for is for you to respond. So that way they can confirm, like, see, I knew you niggas were violent. I knew you got to be very careful when you're dealing with white folks as an African American, specifically white people who don't have a lot of experience with African American culture. Now, you have some white friends, white individuals who grew up with Black people, and they might have an understanding of certain Black cultural norms and things like that. Socially, you still have to be careful because they're just, the outlier. You don't know people that they know or people that they are affiliated with. Because one thing about the white community is that they might have one or two people who are diverse, competent, and who understand the Black community and the struggle. But a lot of times they may have friends or white friends who don't. You get what I'm saying? So you got to be very careful and strategic. I'm not saying you necessarily got to abandon them, but it's like if you're not skillful and if you're not educated when you're dealing with white folks and in these racist times, you're putting yourself in danger. Honestly, you're putting yourself in danger. So you have to be very strategic. You have to be educated. You have to be knowledgeable. That's why I make these videos to kind of validate a lot of the stuff that you younger people are seeing and what you're dealing with. I've dealt with it. I experienced it. And a lot of these videos don't really get too much traction because a lot of people don't want you guys to be educated in the truth. They want you to be ignorant because it doesn't really serve white people for Black people to be knowledgeable of racism because it'll hurt their economy. It'll hurt their politics. When people start to wake up and really understand the brevity of these things, it has dramatic effects, on the money, on capitalism. So it benefits them for you not to talk about a lot of these issues or to create any sort of sustained change. And that's why they got the CIA, the FBI, law enforcement, they're constantly listening through your phone, seeing what you black people are talking about. They got these black identity extremist sort of scans that they're doing because they want to put that fear in black people of really rebelling against this sort of evil racism that's taken over and that's murdering our children. They don't really want you guys to come together, essentially. So what it says here, failure of social desirability masking under real time. So, real time contact, social desirability bias leads people to claim or believe they hold non racist attitudes when discussing diversity in abstract terms. However, real time face to face interaction demands spontaneous social cues, eye contact, tone, body language that are much harder to fake or consciously regulate, allowing subconscious prejudice to leak out. The moral credential effect psychologically. Having a black friend or acquaintance can create a phenomenon known as moral licensing. Individuals feel that they have established credentials as non racist, which paradoxically gives them subconscious permission to express biased attitudes, harsh judgments, or exclusionary behaviors when other black individuals are introduced into their space. Contrast effects and the illusion of intimacy. Without a black person present, white friends observe an individual interacting exclusively with in group members, assuming that warmth extends to everyone. The physical presence of a black person creates a side by side contrast. Observers suddenly see a distinct difference in warmth, body language, and conversational engagement, making the subtle shift in treatment immediately obvious. Okay. So, from a biblical and spiritual perspective, light is fundamentally defined by its divine nature to penetrate darkness, expose what is hidden, and reveal the true state of the human heart. Scripture consistently asserts that light does not create what it reveals, rather, its presence illuminates realities that were already there, lurking in the shadows of deception, pride, or unexamined sin. This is Ephesians 5:13. When applied metaphorically, the presence of Black individuals entering a space can act as a prophetic mechanism of light. Their arrival introduces a sacred standard of truth into environments that may have comfortably maintained an illusion of righteousness, unity, or moral purity. In this sense, the physical and spiritual presence of a Black person serves as a catalyst that forces dormant hatred, subtle human heart. Scripture consistently asserts that light does not create what it reveals. Okay, light does not create what it reveals. Rather, its presence illuminates realities that were already there, lurking in the shadows of deception, pride, or unexamined sin. Okay, this is Ephesians 5:13, just picking up where I left off. When applied metaphorically, the presence of Black individuals entering a space can act as a prophetic mechanism of light. Their arrival introduces a sacred standard of truth into environments that may have comfortably maintained an illusion of righteousness, unity, or moral purity. In this sense, the physical and spiritual presence of a Black person serves as a catalyst that forces dormant hatred, subtle prejudice, and hypocrisy out of secrecy and into the open where it can no longer be denied. This exposing capacity operates on the biblical principle that the human heart is deceitful and often conceals its true condition until tested by a specific divine encounter. This is from Jeremiah 17:9-10. So they talked about this in the Bible, how the human heart can be deceitful above all things. People are not in their sort of natural state exposing and being fully transparent about authentically what they represent in terms of their ethics and their principles. They can be very deceptive in that way where you don't really truly know the nature of a person's biases until a lot of times they get in certain conditions or environments around people who expose them. And they don't even have to say, the person doesn't even have to say anything to expose them. These things might just get exposed by just the person's physical presence, essentially. In Christian theology, God frequently uses the marginalized, the rejected, or the unexpected to confound the self righteous and bring hidden motives into judgment. When a black person steps into a room, the spiritual atmosphere shifts, compelling those present to react out of what is truly stored within their souls, whether that be genuine, Christ like love or latent racial hostility. Just as divine light leaves no room for neutral shadows, the metaphorical light removes the mask of superficial politeness, requiring individuals and communities to confront their true spiritual state before God and one another. Okay? Key Bible verses that speak to light being an exposer, exposing what is hidden in darkness, Ephesians 5:12-13. For it is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. And it makes sense that black people would be metaphorically the light, because, this is like a world of opposites. It's very interesting. Paul explicitly connects light with revelation. Just as physical light makes hidden objects visible, a spiritual light entering a space strips away the pretense of secret attitudes, making latent motives and hidden biases undeniable. John 3:19-20. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. 1 Corinthians 4:5. Therefore, judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. All right? Scripture emphasizes that inner motives can remain hidden from human perception until a revealing moment brings them to light. Black people are the revealers of the intent and the nature of the human heart in these white folks. They are. As soon as black people come on the scene, you see this activation in a lot of these non-black groups, and it kind of reveals their true nature. This is why a lot of times women would rather not even date black men from these different cultures and races. It's not because they necessarily hate brothers, it's just because they know they're afraid of what will be activated in their family members and their friends, and they don't even know if they can handle it. They don't even know if they can handle that. Okay? So black people, you are the light. You are the exposure of the racism, and you expose the intents and motives of the heart in a lot of these non-black groups who hide a lot of their bias and their racism towards people of color, black people specifically. So don't be surprised when you come into environments and there's no black people there, and you come and all of a sudden people are acting different. They're acting funny. They're looking at you crazy. They're exposing all this nastiness, all this nasty behavior that was hidden in that person's heart, and you didn't create that, black folks. You expose what was already in people's heart. All right, so don't take it personal. When you're the light in this world, that's what comes with it. All right.